Okay, we are live.
Hello, hello.
So I think like the first thing that I want to talk about with culture in a company is just like in the book, culture is way more because I don't know. The first thing I think about is like diversity, kind of the stuff we talked about last week, like people's actual ethnicity or where they come from. But it talks a lot about in the book how culture has to do with even just the routines that you have at your company, like what people do on a daily basis, like how they communicate and interact with each other. So I find that really interesting because it's true, like the different jobs I've worked at, there's always been like a different culture of how people act, what they feel like is appropriate to say to their boss, like what they feel is not appropriate. And I definitely feel like the leader or the boss of the company has a big effect on how everybody else reacts or acts in the workplace.
Yeah, I agree with that. The example I think of is like how professors kind of like make the tone of your class. Like it could be a class I'm totally not interested, but if I have like an interesting professor or they just show excitement in it themselves and stuff like that, it'll make me want to be more invested in the class and like actually care and be engaged and stuff like that. So like leaders definitely have an effect or like an influence on the tone and culture of like an organization.
Within the company I work at now, I've worked in different offices within the company. So going along with what everyone's saying, I definitely think the leaders at each of the different offices have shaped the culture where it's like you feel like you're working for a totally different company sometimes, just from like, office to office. So I think leaders definitely, have a great influence on shaping culture.
Yeah, I was gonna say like what Mark was saying. I think there's like cultures within cultures when it comes to like organizations. Like when you get your paperwork at like a job, like the CEO may have a certain culture that he has in mind, or that whoever's in charge, like at the very top, has like a certain culture they're trying to keep. But there's cultures within that major culture. So like if you go to a different office, whoever is the leader of that office may have a totally different mindset than what they're supposed to be, doing on paper. So I think definitely whoever is like the leader of like, I guess the closest leader to you has all the power on how you do it. Like the higher ups would say, hey, don't say these kind of words in our environment. And then your boss at work could be saying those things and being like, nah, like we have our own set of rules here.
Yeah.
I definitely think like to go along with what everyone's saying, that like leaders definitely can impact the culture of like an organization or something. And just from like personal experience, I worked at like Top Golf for a little bit. Like I don't know if I've already said that, but you can tell there they definitely try to like have a culture of everyone who's working there to try to like be having fun and like kind of smile on your face and be like almost like a friend to the customer and stuff like that. And then even like the hiring process and stuff, they try to like instill that in like everyone who they're going to bring on to like the team or whatever. And you can just tell that like they've set out and like really tried to make that like a big thing for them. Like when like any customer walks in, everyone's kind of like, oh, hey, what's up? Like almost like you like know the person, like you're like friends with them and stuff. And it's like during the hiring process, you kind of had to do like weird like, team building things. And they even said they're like looking for people who are like outgoing and like to kind of like, be fun and like try to, have a good time, even if you have to do something kind of weird, like how it's an entertainment facility. So I definitely think like there's different cultures and organizations, and the leaders like can try to instill that upon the company by like who they bring in and like the way they train and stuff.
I after watching the Zappos video, I have a girlfriend that works for GoDaddy, and she just loves her job and will post like on Instagram just like how much fun she's having at her job and like what a good time she has at work. So it's almost like, man, is that somewhere I want to work? Just because like she clearly like loves her job and just enjoys going to work, and it's not like getting up like a lot of times we do with jobs and just like dreading it and just get through the day kind of thing. So
that Zappos video, like what Andrew said, I worked at Top Golf for maybe a month, and it was not for me. It was like,
yeah, right.
Watch that video. I thought exactly of Top Golf because like I got there. And I get the idea of like promoting like company culture, but it was like almost like a cult. Like I didn't feel comfortable there.
No, yeah, it's definitely kind of weird. Like it's like
Wait, which Top Golf are we talking about?
I was in the one at Riverwalk.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Okay.
It was. I mean, it was. I understand. Like, I'd understand like wanting to have like a good work-life balance, like the video mentioned. I think it was in the book too about like being able to balance, or being able to balance work and life is like one of the most popular demands for employees. But I think there's a certain way to go about it. Like, it was like everyone I worked with, like I went into that job with one of my buddies from back home when we first moved out here, and it was like I like saw through it, I guess is the way to put it, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Like, he would post about it, and like he would go home and he'd talk about Top Golf 24/7. And I was like, dude, like I was convinced that they were like brainwashing the people that were working there. It was
yeah, honestly, it gets to the point where it's like, dude, I'm going home from work, like, and I'm gonna go live my normal life, like, not gonna continue, like, yeah, hey, let's just go hang out at Top Golf, and we're not even working.
Yeah, like, I think that's one thing to remember is like it's cool to have company culture, but sometimes it's not for everybody. Like that specific culture set was not for me at all.
Yeah, I'm not. That's kind of why I stopped working there as well.
Yeah, kind of going back to like how like leaders can impact culture. I think like a couple of you said it really depends on like either the office or the location. Like I worked for a retail chain for a while, and we had like a really good store. Like we had a good leader. So like whenever people would come to our store to like help out, they were like, "Oh my God, like this is way nicer than my store. Like I hate going to my store." There was actually one like in our district that was just the worst to work for and had so much turnover because of it. So it like the question of like, can a leader impact culture? I think is like pretty obvious that they can. So yeah, I think we're pretty much in agreement with that.
Well then, I guess example-wise, we listed, I guess, some positives and negatives. I guess I just want to reiterate too, because I remember reading in the book that culture was based off of like languages and symbols and whatnot. So I think definitely as a leader, just to reiterate what we said, as like just give an example of it, is like leaders have like complete control over stuff like that, like language and symbols and like dress code and everything. So like at one of my jobs I had in the past, like my boss was like super like strict, like you can't say this, you can't say that. And then I got to like, I had one job back in high school, like at a local like Italian restaurant, and it was family owned. So like I got there and my boss just started like cussing out a customer, and I was like, oh my God, like I've never seen anything like that before. But like it's the culture of the company. Like when you have a different boss, it's okay with stuff like that. Like you can get away with different things rather than, I guess, your typical corporate organizational kind of thing.
And I feel like that's the crazy thing about it is that the thought of like a family-owned place or a place where like people can just freely speak or do whatever, that it seems really cool, very like laid back and chill, but then it can also end up causing like a negative culture as well. Because if people are kind of just able to do whatever they want and the leader never like sets any rules or never like tells people what to do, I'm kind of dealing with that right now in my job because I feel like the leader is so awesome. Like my boss, like she is so fun, like lets me take off work when I need to, like just super like casual. But I've like watched different people in the company kind of like take over some of the positions she should be doing, if that makes any sense. Like because she's not doing it or she's not saying like, hey, this is my responsibility, this is your responsibility. She's kind of letting people just do what they want. And so that's like caused a lot of issues right now. So I always like come back to thinking about this class that I'm taking and how it's like she's not being a good leader. Like even though she's a great person, a great friend, like she's not being a good leader because she has let the culture become so casual that people are just like running over her, and it's just not good.
Yeah.
I think in like a case like that, it kind of reminds you too that leaders, I would say overall they have a lot of power, but they're in some cases outnumbered.
Yeah.
In your situation like that, where if everyone else just kind of like almost like revolts against what the leader's saying, then they don't have control over the culture. I think to have control, or for the leader to be able to control the culture, they actually have to be a respected leader in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really dumb example, but it's based on what Alec just said. I like to watch The Office before I go to bed at night. And there was an episode I was watching recently where Michael Scott's like, I like to think of myself as your friend first and then your boss. And it's like, how can you establish, you know, like anything with that kind of hierarchy? And it just goes to exactly, I feel like what you were saying, Alec.
Yeah.
Sorry for that dumb example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too when you were talking about earlier. Like what was it, GoDaddy, where someone was posting like how they enjoy going to work, and like it's such a good like environment, and it's kind of like fun. Like you don't like dread going to work. You actually kind of like enjoy being there. And then when you go home, it's like it doesn't feel like you're like, oh, finally, like I can like go do what I want to do now. I think that's like a really important thing for like the type of people that are gonna want to come work for you. Like you kind of said it, where it's like like if I was hearing those things about a job and like hearing some of the stuff like sounds like fun and stuff, it's like you could attract like really good people to your job. So like like having that type of culture and then having a leader who like promotes that type of culture will just like kind of make your company better by like attracting people who like you know want to come work for you, and they're probably like qualified and things like that.
Yeah. Just to like give an example of like a negative like culture, I guess, like in the prompt or whatever. Like you guys have kind of touched on this, but just when like the leader is not in control, like my first job was at a restaurant for like a few months, but yeah, like our manager was just so casual that like there was drama there, and it was like really immature. That just like created this whole negative culture, and it was like just super immature way to run like an organization. So like again, it's an example of how like a leader can impact like the whole culture of an organization. So
Yeah.
It's interesting, like Tim and Andrew talking about Top Golf, and it's like they look at that as like a negative, I'm maybe not say culture, but just a negative thing. Whereas I think Tim was saying his buddy just totally bought in and he was all a part of it. So it's just really interesting how, two of us could talk about the same job and have totally different, feelings about that kind of culture.
Yeah, definitely.
I think like with that in mind, it goes to show that I guess your culture outside of work also affects how well you do with a certain organizational culture. So like for me, outside of work, I don't know. I don't know. I've never been one that's like, oh my God, like I'm gonna have a smile on my face 24/7 and I'm gonna dance at work kind of mood. So yeah. I went into it thinking like, oh, like I don't even know why I'm applying for this job. Whereas my buddy already had like that kind of outgoing like persona about him. So I think
like if you fit with that culture, then like you're gonna like it. And that's what like the organizational culture means, is like it's an underlying belief. Like you didn't even have to like ask somebody, is this how Top Golf is? Like you could already just tell that that's like what the culture was gonna be. And so it's like if that's not who you are or you don't like that, like it's not always gonna mix well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They have like, I mean, like you can go online and like you could probably find on Google too, like what people like will review their jobs, or you can even go and just like sit, like if you go to Top Golf as a customer and see how the people act, you might be like, oh, like this is a great culture. I'd probably fit in well. Or like with Mark's example where his friend was talking about GoDaddy, where if you just hear about the culture, like at least you go into it having an idea of what it's like and you're not kind of just like shocked about it. And they usually put stuff like that on like their company webpage or anything about, hey, this is our like mission statement. This is our culture that we strive for. So it's not like you're going into it completely blind. Most places are pretty obvious about what culture they follow.
Definitely.
Anything else?
No, I think we like covered the prompt pretty well. I think we're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, I have to use the restroom too, so that is good timing.
Okay, everybody's good?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, awesome. See you guys next week.